What our youth can do in the world in the name of their Lord and King is an outcome of our schools, big and small. When the question is put to you, Catholic educators, administrators, professors, teachers, guidance counselors, campus ministers, librarians, lab technicians, can you sustain our schools, continue to form our youth in the joy and challenge of the gospel in today's world?
Our educational and managerial talents or skills will not be enough to be able to form, educate our young people. We need more than that. We need God's presence in ourselves as being entrusted with the care of His children, but also God's presence in our schools, Catholic as they are.
Catholic schools are resolved to continue providing Catholic education to Filipinos. They, the Catholic schools, say this because of the deep value they recognize in integrating the proclamation of the good news in Jesus Christ and formation in the Catholic faith with the delivery of excellent education.
As I accept the CAP presidency, I want to thank my colleagues in the CAP board who put their trust in me and elected me to be their leader. The real leadership is synodal in character. It is in walking together, not so much in agreeing with each other at all times, but in discerning the best pathways and positions through consultation, dialogue, and even debate, always bearing in mind the renewal of the Church.
Yesterday, as soon as I entered the convention center, I felt invigorated, especially seeing colleagues learning once again. For us, to learn is to serve, teaching and preaching is service, and we preach with our lives.
Far away from here, I could be finding other reasons, but I need away from here, where we can finally make it, you and I. Far away from here.
The Catholic School Heroes Award is a sweet song to my heart. Receiving this recognition is a great blessing to me. Today, I am overwhelmed with gladness that CAP, the association which I value so much, has been part of my life and which has been part of my life for more than 3 decades, has considered my simple work significant.
Well, we can finally make it, you and I. Well, we can finally make it, you and I.
This recognition deepens the meaning of what I do and fires me with more passion for teaching. even at this stage. To our Heavenly Father, I offer my unending songs of praise and thanksgiving for all that I have and for all that I am.
The 2019 CAP National Convention started with three objectives in mind: to provide a venue to listen to the young and understand the aspects of today's youth culture, to find pathways of accompanying and empowering the youth, to determine ways by which CAP can formulate creative responses and innovative solutions to the needs of the youth and society. Mabuhay at magandang umaga sa lahat na manonood ng webinar na ito. My name is Allan Arellano, Executive Director of the CAP, and I will be moderating today's session. Before we formally start the webinar, may I invite everyone to spend a moment of silence and pause as we pray and ask God for His guidance in these trying times. Let us remember all our personal intentions as well as those of our country and of the Holy Catholic Church. In the silence of our hearts, try to think of the victims of this pandemic and those who are at the forefront of this challenging health threat. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Panginoon, pinasasalamatan ka namin sa magandang araw na ito. Salamat sa kaaya-ayang pagkakataon at sa mga pagpapaala mo sa amin. Nais ka rin naming pasalamatan, Panginoon, sa pag-akay mo sa amin upang magsama-sama kami sa pagkakatuto bilang isang pamayanan. Pagbuklo rin mo kami, Panginoon, sa pagtalakay, sa pakikinig, sa pagkakatuto mula sa aming panauhing tagapagsalita. Gabayan mo po siya at pagpalain ng malalim na kaalaman. Naway, ang iyong mga salita ng pag-asa, kapayapaan, kabutihang loob ay maibahagi mo sa amin sa pamamagitan ng aming tagapaghatid at mapatatag niya kami sa pagharap ng mga hamon ng pandemya para sa buti ng aming mga kabataan ng sambayanan. All of these we asked in the name of Jesus, our loving teacher. Amen. Good morning once again. This is the third session of the third leg of the CAP webinar series that we are doing in partnership with Clips Publishing Company. Maraming salamat po, Ms. Mika Huertas Alcaria, for supporting this. Last Thursday, we had a session on formation from a distance, ensuring student discipline and safety and online learning. This was delivered by the iconic Attorney Ulan Sarmiento. Today, our session is going to be on cultivating a culture of dialogue in remote learning. Before we proceed, let me give a few reminders. First, as the talk is ongoing, you may post your questions at the comments section of this Facebook page. We will be asking these questions during the Q&A portion. Second, please be informed that you will receive the certificate of attendance only upon completion of the evaluation form. The link will be posted in the comments section later and will be available online only until 2 p.m. today, July 28, 2020. Again, only until 2 p.m. today. We encourage you to answer the evaluation form and you will receive your certificate of attendance via email. Please ensure that you type down both your names and email addresses accurately. Please be reminded as well that this is a free webinar. If there are people who are asking for your credit card numbers or bank account number, they are not from CAP. Lastly, we encourage you to share this webinar to your networks with hashtags CAP Cares, hashtag I love Catholic Ed. Let us now proceed with the webinar. For this webinar entitled Cultivating a Culture of Dialogue in Remote Learning, we have invited a special guest, a good friend of CAP for the last many years. Bata pa ako, nakikita ko na si Dr. Pilar in various roles and capacity within the CAP network. She is currently the Dean of the UST College of Education and the President of CAP Sacred. Ano yung Sacred? Society for Advancement of Catholic Religious Education. She is one of the crafters of the Philippine Catholic School Standards for Higher Education and a member of the CAP National Higher Education Commission. But above all, she is a wife, mother, teacher,
writer, and prolific speaker. Let us all welcome our good friend, Dr. Pilar Romero. Palakpakan natin siya.
Maraming salamat, Allan. Thank you very much. It's an honor to be with you. Gusto ko introduction mo, except for the bata pa ako. No? Nasa CEAP na siya. Well, admittedly, no, I am na, sabi ko nga, it's not my habit to lie about my age. No? I'm a senior citizen. I just let my face lie about my age. So, mas maganda yung ganon. Okay, so good morning to all of you, to all of those who are tuned in to our webinar this morning. You see, this is a very, I would say, a very timely topic, considering that all of us are grappling, okay, with strategies, with approaches that we can effectively use, especially in this time of remote teaching. No? Of course, there are pluses and minuses in remote teaching, but the reality is, this is the situation, and how can we best make wise use of this particular situation as teachers? Okay, so let me start. No? If you notice the title, no, there is a play on words there. Okay, it's all up to you. No, we know naman, no, that it's all up to you should be UP. Okay, but it's all up to you. It's APP. So it's a play on word, and later on, play on words, and later on, we'll find out why we are calling this "It's all up to you." Okay, so let's begin with our presentation. Okay, a slide, please. Okay, do we have the first slide? Okay, so thank you. So that's our first slide. You would see that, you know, in education, even in the so-called normal times, no, teaching is like orchestrating seemingly discordant voices. Okay, so what do we mean by that? You know, I'm not a musician, but I know that in an orchestra, not everyone is playing the same notes. Okay, so some would be playing this note, another would be playing this note, and what is admirable is that this maestro is able to bring out the harmony, despite the fact that different instruments would be playing different notes. And that is precisely what we want to happen in our education, in our teaching learning process, that we bring out the harmony despite the fact that there are discordant voices. And what are these discordant voices? Okay, we look into, there is the learner context, there is the teacher context, there is the technology context, there is also the mode of delivery, and add to that is the fact that we who are in Catholic school are supposed to lead our learners, okay, to accompany our learners towards a culture of encounter and dialogue. Now, taking into consideration all this context, all these discordant voices, how then do we bring about, or how then do we accompany our learners towards encounter and dialogue? Okay. Now, let's look at the different contexts. Okay, so next slide, please. Okay, so this is our telos. As I was saying, in the Catholic school, we have a different telos. A telos is we have a different goal. No, we have a different vision. No, our vision is not only to form professionals, but professionals with conscience. Our telos is not only to bring out or to form future useful citizens for the country, but faithful members of the church. No? So there is always added value to our telos. Now, we bring that out, okay, by two things. First, by looking into how do we promote dialogue in our schools, okay? So let's look at the meaning of dialogue. No, I'm taking from Pope Francis. Okay, so he said that what we need to develop is a culture of dialogue. Ibig sabihin niyan, it's not something that happens sporadically. A culture of dialogue is something that happens consistently, perpetually, okay, and to a certain degree in such a way that we develop in each one of us in school an appreciation of other cultures, and we consider other cultures and people different from us as worthy of being listened to. I think this is very much applicable in the classroom, whether remotely or in person, okay, that each student is worth listening to, no matter how different this student or this learner may be. And that is a very good germ, a very good start for dialogue. Okay. And what will be the result of this? According to Pope Francis, there will be lasting peace. Okay. That is our ultimate quest. Okay, especially in this time. There will be lasting peace if we form our children in dialogue. And how do we form them in dialogue? We teach them the skills for encounter and negotiation. Okay, this way we will be able to hand on to them a culture which is capable of devising strategies of life, not death, of inclusion, not exclusion. In other words, they grow to become all-embracing people, okay, who are ready to accept others without judgment. Okay, so that's dialogue. Okay, and this is very much relevant nowadays because we are beset with a lot of systems. We have racism, we have sexism, and all kinds of isms. Okay, and dialogue, I think, would be some sort of a panacea for that. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so how can we cultivate this? Okay, there's the attitude. At the attitude level, the attitude of respect for the other person. Okay, which springs from a conviction that this person has something good to say. We do not automatically cancel. Ngayon, usong-uso yung mga cancel, di ba? O cancel this, cancel that person. Okay, but in dialogue, we say that we try to see, we are moved by that conviction that this person has something good to say, and let's listen. Okay, so you would see that dialogue is really premised on our willingness and eagerness to listen. Okay, so it assumes that there is room in the heart for the person's point of view, opinion, and proposal. To dialogue, according to the address of Pope Francis when he was in America, it entails a cordial reception, not a prior condemnation. In other words, when we want to dialogue, we have to get rid of our biases and judgments and try to listen to the other person. Okay, we cannot be maintaining preconceived notions, because these preconceived notions will be some kind of a hindrance, okay, that will color, okay, our listening to the other person. Okay, so it starts at the attitude level. Okay, so that's dialogue. Okay, how about a culture of encounter? Next slide, please. Okay, of course, if there is dialogue, what follows is encounter, or some would say there should be encounter first before dialogue, but we are talking about an encounter, not simply a face-to-face, no, but it is encounter at a deeper level. Okay, in fact, culture of encounter is the soundbite of Pope Francis. Kasi bawat Pope may mga soundbites sila. And this is a soundbite of Pope Francis because it's very, very consistent, okay, and emphatic in his talk of encounter. Okay, so what is encounter? Similar to dialogue, okay, when we want to have encounter, there should be the primacy of compassion over judgment. Okay, for Pope Francis, encounter doesn't have anything to do with idea. Encounter starts with person and relationship. And if we are following his writing during the launch of the Global Compact on Education, which should have happened in May, marireset sa October, and we do not know if it's happening in October, but nevertheless, we can pick a lot of good things from his speech during the launch. Okay, and what did he say? Educating the young, especially the young, is all about relationship. Okay, teaching is a relationship. Teaching is all about relationship, and it's not just an ordinary kind of relationship. Pedro Poveda would insist that teaching entails a moral relationship. Okay, because we impact our learners not only in terms of what they know, but also in terms of the choices that they make in life. Okay, and if we are able to impact them somehow, to accompany them and impact their choices in life, then we say encounter really happens. Okay, next slide please. Okay, so that is our telos, no? Yung telos na yan, kaya nga if you remember, no, the illustration I showed a while ago, okay? The organizer I showed a while ago, this encounter and dialogue is at the center because it's the telos. Now, there are factors that would influence that. Okay, that one in the center, our telos. And what are those? First is the teacher context. Okay, if we look at the faculty room, okay, we would see that there are three kinds of teachers now in the faculty room. Okay, first we have, unahin natin yung mga katulad ko, no? Unahin natin yung mga baby boomer. Okay, no? Itong mga, my children would always tell me pag meron akong pinipilit sa kanila and they can't seem to accept, sabihin nila sa akin, okay, boomer. No? So, baby boomer. Okay. And some of these baby boomers are experiencing what Richard Rohr, no, Franciscan spiritual writer, what Richard Rohr would say, they are already experiencing what we call liminal space. Okay, what is that liminal space? We are at this point in our life, especially with the onset of the pandemic, we are at that point in our life when we are really questioning, do I continue? Do I now retire? Do I embark on another preoccupation which may not really be an occupation, but something that has to do with myself, my spirituality, my mental health? So mga baby boomers, they are already experiencing that, what we call liminal space. Okay? Then, aside from that, we also have a plenty of Generation X's in the classroom or in the faculty room, in the school. Okay, ito naman mga Generation X, they are the independent-minded people who need minimal supervision. No? And sometimes there seems to be, what happens is not really a conflict, no, but an opposition, no, between the baby boomer and the Gen X. Okay, and then finally, we have a lot in our classroom, a lot of millennial teachers. Okay, whenever I give seminars, I used to go around and give seminars, I would notice that there are young people or millennials who are cluttering, not really cluttering, no, but who are in the schools. Okay, and what is very good about these millennials is that they are really very dynamic. Okay, they are also into technology, and it's really very easy to train them, especially in the area of remote teaching. But there are also some, minuses, like millennials, they say, and I have observed this, would hardly stay in one profession or in one occupation. Okay, they would explore one occupation after another. And, this is the first time I heard of this. Dati tayo, no? We have the so-called midlife crisis, di ba? At age 40, we are already experiencing our midlife crisis. But for the millennials, there is such a thing as quarter life crisis. At the age 25, quarter life, no, or 20, 21, nagkakaroon na sila ng crisis. That's why they move to another job, no, try to find what they are looking for and move to another job. Now, if this is the context of our teachers, meron tayong boomers, meron tayong Generation X, meron tayong millennials. Okay, this is really a challenge when it comes to us trying to maintain or even work at achieving encounter and dialogue. Okay, so that's the teacher context. The next slide, please. The learner context. Okay, the context of our learners who are supposed to be the superstars in the teaching learning universe. Okay, the sun in the teaching learning universe. How do we classify them? Of course, again, as I would say, these young people have received a lot of bashing from us old people, from our seniors, but they have their own good points. Okay, so I took this. This is very minimal. I just chose three from Harvard Business Review. The writer Schobel, he coined the term Homo sapiens. Okay, this is a play on words. Ang alam natin, di ba, Homo sapiens, no? Referring to the human person with intelligence and will and all that, no? But young people are now called Homo sapiens. Okay, no? So what does FOMO mean? Siyempre, hindi ko kayo maririnig, no? FOMO means, this is the term which means fear of missing out. FOMO, fear of missing out. So Dan Schobel would say that we now have a generation of young people who always fear that they will miss out on something. That's why they are constantly, almost 24/7, okay, tuned in to Twitter, to Instagram, in order to see what is happening because they don't want to miss out on something. Okay, that's why they are called FOMO sapiens. Okay, now, looking at the Instrumentum Laboris on Global Education Compact, there is a word there that was used, no, in the Instrumentum Laboris. It is said that, well, I suppose this is not only of young people, no, there are also some senior people who are guilty of this. Egolatry. No? In our culture now and in our generation, there is rampant egolatry. Okay, this is again, no, as contrast to idolatry. It's really the self. It has become, it's all about me. Okay, kahit even if we are talking about the issue, ang mangyayari sa this young person who always say, it's me, it's all about me. No, that's why there are a lot of but to a certain extent also very true of young people is there is the dearth of interiority. Okay, there is somehow that fear of looking deep into one's self, of communing with oneself and trying to see what is happening there inside, not only what is happening outside but what is happening inside. So there is that dearth of interiority, perhaps because the generation now is not very comfortable with silence, no, and as it is said, no, silence is the language of God, right? And it is in silence that we could really plumb into the depths of our heart, no, and try to get rid of that dearth of interiority. Okay, so we see the teacher context, we see the learner context. What are the other contexts? Next slide, please. Okay, context then yung ating remote mode of delivery. We know for a fact that nowadays, no, there are three. Okay, so may remote teaching tayo, which obviously is detached. Okay, even if we say we deliver all their learning packets and their modules, it's detached. Okay, in UST we have the so-called enriched virtual mode, which is detached and also impersonal, because what you see is the image. It's not someone, it's not really the person that you are talking about, it's an image of the person. There is some kind of an impersonality there, no? And it's all because it is mediated by technology. And if it's mediated by technology, again, no, the challenge of making really an impact, no? Kaya nga kanina, no, before we started, I made sure, no, that my daughter will dial me up for this particular encounter para kahit man lang yung itsura ko magkaroon ng impact, no? So the challenge of impact really is real, no, when we use technology. So that's the mode of delivery. And finally, the last context is, next slide, technology in the Philippines. Okay, we are familiar to this. Anong klaseng technology meron tayo sa Pilipinas, no? Well, of course, there's issue on access. At times, no, we've seen this in the news. Teachers who would have to go to a hill or a mountain, no, para makakuha ng signal. Okay, if you may have the gadget but you don't have a hotspot. Okay, or you may have no gadget and no hotspot. Okay, intermittent to no signal. And of course, that's a very important economy of device and data. These things need money. Okay, so economy, where do I get the device? And if I have the device, kung wala naman akong pambili ng data, then it would amount to nothing. Okay? So those are the 4 contexts that we need to consider, okay, in our teaching. And not only in our teaching, but in really trying how can we achieve our telos of encounter and dialogue. Okay? So next slide, please. Okay, now this context, this difficulties, this challenging that we are experiencing, we actually have a lot. We can seek the help of a lot of people and a lot of apps, and technology could also help us. No? So you see, up and away. Bakit up and away? There are a lot of apps that will make you soar as a teacher. Okay, if you open your app store, if you have a Mac, or if you open your Google Play and you click categories, you will see all these apps. Okay. And these apps, kaya nga sabi, up, and it will really make you soar, no? So a lot, no? You have their education, you have their games, you have their lifestyle, you have their news. Okay. So next slide, please. Okay. So these are the apps, no? Ayan, pag click nyo dyan yung education, then all the apps that you need will be there. For example, let's look at the next slide. Okay, yeah, no. So there are apps that are free, and these free apps are also very good. Okay, so you have their the desktop, no, and so on and so forth. Meron din paid, so huwag na tayong pumunta sa paid, no. Doon na lang tayo sa free apps. Okay, next. And ito sa Google, 12 good Chromebook apps for teachers. Okay, then next. Also, some very interesting strategies that you can use using particular apps for the Indeed, there are many apps. But again, as I said, even in the face of this myriad of apps, it's still all up to you. Okay. What do I mean by that? Okay, next. Next slide, please. Okay, so meron tayong galaxy of apps, galaxy of pedagogies and approaches. And on top of that, on top of these apps, we can also explore other pedagogies or other andragogies or other ways of unpacking our lesson. No? I'm just going to present 3 no, that you can use, especially these 3 are very friendly to remote teaching. Okay. The first one is what we call utagogy. Okay, utagogy, utagogy. Okay, let's all pronounce it. Utagogy. Okay, no, from yuto, okay, meaning to discover. Okay, now this is a very good, in fact, educationists, experts would say that we should move from pedagogy to andragogy to hotagogy. Ano ba ang difference yan? Pedagogy is teacher-centered. Okay? Andragogy is both teacher and learner-centered. Okay, so it's dimensional, 2-dimensional. But when we go to utagogy, it's multi-dimensional because it's self-directed and self-determined learning. So what happens here is the learner reflects upon what is learned, okay, and how it is learned, and in which educators teach learners how to teach themselves, okay? So this is very good in the sense that it trusts that the learners is capacitated to learn by himself and to teach by himself. Now, some proponents of educational technology say that this is a very net-centric theory, okay, because it takes advantage of the affordances of the internet, okay? So very good for distance education as well as a very good framework for digital age teaching and learning because it's self-paced. Diba ganyan nga yung principle natin sa asynchronous. It's self-paced and it's self-directed. That's why it's very good when we use technology. That's utagogy. Okay. Then after utagogy, we have, next slide please. Okay, this is my favorite. Pedagogy. Kasi, di ba, during the start of the pandemic and up until now, wala tayong masyadong pira. Okay. Anyway, Pedagogy. Okay, what does this mean? Okay, pedagogy from the word peer. Okay, so here naman, what it tries to do is try to stir in the learner some kind of a collaborative spirit. Okay, pedagogy, it practices peer-to-peer and decentered learning. Ang ibig sabihin ng decentered learning is that the center of learning moves away from the teacher into the peers. Okay, the aim is to empower the worldwide population of self-motivated learners who use digital media to connect with each other and to co-construct knowledge, to co-learn. In other words, I don't learn alone. I learn with my other peers. And what is very interesting here is that somehow you feel confident because you are with your peers. Unlike if you are, there's the teacher and there is you realize that there is that gap and somehow the teacher is more advanced than you. But when it comes to your peer, more or less, you have the feeling that you are in equal footing. That's why you co-construct knowledge and you co-learn. Okay, it could also be you co-deconstruct knowledge, no, not only construct. No? So there is that possibility that learning becomes more fun if you do it with your peers. Okay, peers. Okay, now what is the basic premise? Anyone can teach anyone else. Why? Because everyone knows something, but no one knows everything. So if you have someone who tells you, hey, I know everything, and well, tell that person, you're not Google, you don't know everything. Okay, so everyone knows something, but no one knows everything. So your peer may know something which he or she can communicate to you, but he may not know something that you may know. Okay, so here students can, in remote or not really in remote, no, but in many cases, students can even teach their teachers. Okay, in an extreme case of flipped learning, no, and when during the pre-pandemic times, no, ganyan na ngayon yung reckoning natin ng time, no, during the pre-pandemic time, teaching really very difficult to teach. Why? Because your students could always fact check you. Okay, because they have access to all these facts. No, that's why you have to be very careful. There was this one instance of a teacher teaching something on literature, and then suddenly the student raised his hand and say, "I'm sorry, but what you're teaching is wrong." So the teacher was astounded. No, sabi, teacher, what are you saying? Well, I just fact checked it. Okay, so in certain instances, no, teachers must and should also be open to learning, and learning that comes from their learners or from their students. No? This is an extreme case of flipped learning. Okay, that's pedagogy, peer. And the last one, the last go G, is what we call cosmogogy. Okay, from the word cosmos, okay, universe. Okay, so this is a study of learning well connected to the world by using online technologies. The context is learning with rather than about. It is said that, this is very interesting because here you learn with the world, not about the world. Okay, it puts the learner at the center of the universe with the capacity of reaching out and connecting to anything and anyone in order to find information and build understanding, in order to collaborate and to co-create with anyone, anywhere, anytime. In other words, I can co-create with anyone, anywhere in the world. That's why it's learning with the world, not about the world. One trend in architecture now, I know one of our professors in architecture in UST is actually working with a Singaporean architectural firm. And what he does is to co-create with architects in Singapore without the necessity of going to Singapore. Okay, because we can do that anytime, anywhere. Okay, and that is the beauty of cosmogogy. Okay, it's learning with the world, not about the world. Okay, so again, as I said, these are very good strategies. These are very good methods of teaching, especially now, no, that we are into remote teaching. Okay. But then again, we go back to our basic premise. You may use this, you can use this, but we have to remember, just like what is stated in the National Catechetical Directory for the Philippines, the effectivity of any method does not lie in the method itself. It lies in the user of the method. It lies in the skillful use of a particular method. And who is going to use that? Again, it all boils down to the facilitator of learning, the teacher. And I very much like to call teachers facilitator of learning. Why? Because to facilitate comes from the word facil. Okay, facil, which means easy. Okay, so teachers are supposed to make learning easy. That's why they are called facilitators of learning. Okay, so next slide, please. Okay, so there are pedagogies, there are apps, there are methods, but let me put in something into the discussion, which originally I thought of. You know, what is good about the pandemic is that it has allowed us a lot of time, really, no? A lot of time to sleep. Well, sleeping, sabi nga natin, insights of Joseph came when he was sleeping. Okay, so in a dream. And so it allows us a lot of time for reflection. Okay, reflecting about this new situation that we are facing, reflecting about our own future as well. If we have a family, our life as a family, our future as educators, the future of our school system, the future of Catholic education. And if we think of that, then we have to do something now at this present time. I mean, we don't wait for the future to happen, but we make things happen now. No? And somehow this is the beauty of this pandemic. Now we have to see something beautiful in this, in that it allowed us time to reflect, and it allowed this reflection to somehow crystallize. And the reflection becomes something really concrete. It does not remain at the level of reflection. Once it crystallizes, it becomes a call for action. Okay, and this was how the practice-oriented approach was born. Okay, short history lang, if you will allow me to share. Okay, in UST, in the College of Education, we have our laboratory school. Okay, the UST Education High School, where our pre-service teachers, fourth year secondary ed teachers, would have their practicum. And since it's a laboratory high school, we wanted to become a hub for innovation. Okay, many years ago, when I was still student of that education high school, wag niyo nang tanungin, baka hindi pa kayo buhay nung time na yun, sabi nga ni Allan, no? We pioneered, no, the the individualized instruction. Okay, and then after some years, I know what happened. Now that I'm back in the College of Education, no, I looked at the education high school, and I see the time is ripe for innovation. Okay, so I was thinking, how can I best help our education high school students, especially in this time of remote teaching? How best can I help them appreciate and appreciate the lesson and move them to action? So I thought of what I would call the praxis-oriented approach. And in short, it's called PRO-AP. Okay, so that's another reason why we are calling this seminar, It's All Up to You. Because the center and the core and the gist of our discussion will be this PRO-AP approach, in the hope that you may want to try this. Okay, you may want to enrich it. It's you know, if I may borrow the words of Monsignor Jerry, this is some kind of a martyr document. You may want to remove one part and replace it with another part. You may want to tear it, no, and put together the pieces in the way that you want. Okay, so I'm sharing this so that you too might have your reflection and try to see how you can even better this particular approach. But if you think it's already okay, then okay, you may use it free. Okay, wala pong ano yan, walang royalty. Basta sabihin nyo lang na galing sa sa magandang dean ng College of Education. Anyway, so praxis-oriented approach is PROACT. Okay, so nowadays there is really nothing that is so original. Okay, if somebody says that I came up with something original, well, you raise your eyebrow and say, is that really original? The PROACT is original in the sense that it tries to bring out something out of already existing frameworks. Okay, and I would say that this praxis-oriented approach is based on or is built on the foundation of two existing approaches already. Okay, first of this is what I would call the phenomenon-based learning. Okay, how many of you have heard of the phenomenon-based learning? Okay, syempre hindi ko kayo marinig. Okay, phenomenon-based learning. And the other one is the shared Christian praxis approach. Okay, now for me to justify my saying that it is built on the foundation of two existing approaches, we have to know what these approaches are. Okay, so we look first at the phenomenon-based learning. Okay, let's look at it. Next slide, please. What is this phenomenon-based learning? No, they have their own website. Now, if you want to look at what phenomenon-based learning is, you can source their website. Okay. In phenomenon-based learning, you know, I got interested in this because I saw this post on Facebook. It says that Finland is the first country to adopt a phenomenon-based learning approach in their schools. I got curious. Ano ba ito? No? So I tried to Google and then I saw sa website nila what phenomenon-based learning is all about. So in phenomenon-based learning and teaching, it adopts a holistic, real-world phenomena. It provides the starting point for learning. In other words, learning does not start with an idea. Learning does not start with a principle. Learning does not start with a subject matter. It starts with a real-world phenomenon. Okay, it provides the starting point for learning. And, you know, nowadays, there are really a myriad of phenomena that we can look into and that we could use as a starting point for learning. Okay, now, you would see that as we discussed okay, that the phenomenon is not really like a jumping board. Okay, or it's not like just a springboard. The difference is that the phenomena is studied as a complete entity in itself, in the real context. And the information and skills that are related to this phenomena are studied by crossing the boundaries between different subjects. Okay, so for example, there is the phenomena of the pandemic. Okay, if we want to be very, very relevant and up to time. Okay, the phenomena of the pandemic. Okay, so it's not only used as a springboard, but when you unpack your lessons, you still make use of the phenomena. So you look at the phenomenon rather of pandemic when you go into your science. Yan, madali yan, no? Science. Okay, when you go into history. Okay, and even in Christian living. Okay, so the phenomenon of pandemic could be a unifying theme that would tie up the different subject areas without the teacher abandoning the particular topic or lesson that should be taught in a particular subject area. Okay, later on you would see this incarnated. Okay, when I go into the specific lesson plan model. Okay, incorporating this and also the shared Christian. Okay, so that is basically what phenomenon or phenomenon-based learning is all about. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so according to phenomenon, the proponents of phenomenon-based learning, instead of learning the subjects themselves for the sake of learning, the students will be given the opportunity to choose from phenomena from their real surroundings in the world, such as, for example, media and technology and the pandemic, or so pressing social issue. So, medyo nagbabago yung view natin of education. Okay? Because sometimes we are so fixated with the subject matter that we think that we educate the learners so that they will learn about the subject. Okay, one teacher said, I don't teach a subject, I teach students, I teach people, I teach learners. Okay, so it's not the subject for the sake of learning the subject. Because if that is the case, okay, you miss out on a very important criteria in education, and that is relevance. That's why a lot of our students would say, major in arts ako. Bakit naman meron kaming math? Because math is taught for the sake of learning math. We don't see that math can be used in order to scrutinize existing phenomena within our environment. So that is what phenomenon-based learning would like to emphasize. It's not learning the subject for the sake of learning the subject themselves. Okay? But giving these learners the opportunity to see how this particular phenomenon could be viewed more objectively, more accurately, and from the lens of a particular learning area. Okay, so in other words, the learner and the learning and the school is not detached from life. Okay, the old concept of the school as laboratory for life and society. Okay, so phenomenon-based. Okay, let's proceed. Next. Okay, yeah. So this phenomenon will be studied through an interdisciplinary approach. This is what I was saying. For example, the COVID-19 pandemic could be investigated through the lens of science. Madali yan. Kasi, a lot of materials are telling us now, ano ba ang nature ng virus, how is it different from bacteria, how best we can get rid of the virus, So, ito na yung mga nasa consciousness ng mga tao, So, it's very easy to relate it to science. How about to history? Okay, that this is not the first time that the world has experienced a pandemic. Okay, there have been pandemics in our history. Okay, at least I can, I'm not a historian, but at least I can remember. Hindi naman remember, kasi hindi pa ako buhay. I can pinpoint two, the bubonic plague or the pneumonic plague, and then the Spanish influenza. Okay. Now, when we look at this, we do not, again, history is not about dates. One very good Dominican historian would say, history is about learning the mindsets of people during their time of history. Because that will explain to us why things happen because of mindset. So we look into the mindset, how people during the time look at pandemic and how we are looking at pandemic now. And this is influenced so much by our mindset. Okay, and then from the perspective of Christian living, Facebook is replete with a lot of way of looking at the pandemic in a very Christian living way. Both positive and negative. Some would say, is the pandemic a punishment? If that is the case, then what happens to our idea of a merciful God? Okay, is the pandemic an occasion for conversion? Okay, how about those people, or naman who think that this pandemic has nothing to do at all with the way we are as human persons in terms of our spirituality. So there is a lot of way that we can look at this pandemic from the different learning areas. Okay, so that's phenomenon-based learning. Next, please. Okay, so after the phenomenon-based, another framework that I made use of in this particular pro-app or praxis-oriented approach is the very famous Shared Christian Praxis approach by Thomas Groom. Any religious education teacher or professional worth his or her salt should know Thomas Groom. Kilala natin siya, no? One of the leading proponents yan of a religious education, okay, a theologian, and he's connected with, I believe, Boston University. Okay, so he is the originator, okay, and the brains behind the so-called shared Christian praxis approach. Okay, now what is this shared Christian approach? This will resonate with you, no? Even if you are not a Christian living education teacher, if you are a teacher of a Catholic school, and even if you're not a teacher of Catholic school, there are grains of truth that you could get from this shared Christian praxis approach. So the basic goal or vision of Thomas Groom in the shared Christian approach is simple: bringing life to faith and faith to life. Bringing life to faith. Ibig sabihin, mabuhay. Maging buhay ang ating pananampalataya. Paano mangyayari yun? Mabubuhay ang ating pananampalataya kung dadalhin natin ang pananampalataya sa ating buhay. Okay. His basis for this bringing faith to life, bringing life to faith and faith to life is the famous quote from Gaudium et Spes, no? Church in the Modern World. Ang sabi dyan, one of the most serious errors or tragedies of our age is the split between the faith which we profess and our daily lives. In other words, what Gaudium et Spes is saying is that we profess this faith. I believe. But when it comes to, when we buckle down to work in our daily lives, there seems to be the absence of what we profess. So that is what he wants, not to bring life to faith and faith to life. Okay? This is something that is basic. No, this is a no-brainer. We don't have to crack our heads to understand this because we know that this is something basic. Okay. So what are the other features of the shared Christian approach? Himayin natin. There is the shared, there is the Christian, and there is the praxis. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay. So the shared Christian approach. Okay. First, we look at the word praxis. No, praxis is an old term, no, as old as Aristotle, yan, no. But I would say that I become very familiar with the word practice because of liberation theology. Okay, and social teachings of the church. Okay, praxis. Praxis is in the domain of acting. Okay, it's not in the domain of thinking as opposed to abstract. It is in the domain of acting and doing. Okay. It is not so much theoretical knowledge, although we know that theoretical knowledge is important. But morality, according to praxis, is the quality of acting and doing instead of just thinking. In other words, what we want is ito yung linya, no, na naalala ko from my moral theology professor. Orthodoxy should lead to orthopraxis. Right thinking leads to right action. Okay, the way people, okay, act, okay, in regards to certain moral issues that they need to address. So there is more to praxis than just acting, no? Especially if we connect the word ortho. It is positive action, and to a larger context, if we look at society, it's positive social action. So that's a very important component of shared Christian praxis. Inuna natin yung praxis na sa huli siya, pero kasi dahil importante siya. Okay? Praxis. What is other words in the praxis-oriented approach or pro-app? Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so it's shared Christian praxis approach nga eh, okay? So by means of conversation or dialogue with self or others, how do we bring about praxis? You know, praxis is not born in a vacuum. Or it is not born out of the blue. You don't pull it out of the blue. No? Praxis takes place by means of conversation or dialogue. And this dialogue doesn't have to be with another person. Praxis can be born out of dialogue with the self or with others. Okay? So Paramata yan. Yung Paramata kasi it's a diocese in Australia that adapt in toto. Okay, the shared praxis approach by Thomas Groom. Okay, so there is the shared. Now there is the Christian. The process, the praxis, if it has to be Christian, it must be influenced by Christ. Naturally, in CLE, we have the so-called Christocentricity. It must be influenced by Christ. It must be influenced by the Christian story in scriptures, in the Bible. And it must be influenced by the Christian vision, or I would say the vision of the Father for us, his children. And we know what the vision of the Father is for us, his children. For us to have happiness and Jesus, for us to have life and life in its fullness. That's the vision. So, completo, shared Christian praxis. Our praxis, our action is informed by and influenced by Christ, by the Christian story, by the Christian vision, by the vision of the Father. And this vision of the Father, this Christ and the Christian story would engender in us dialogue with the self and with the others, and therefore bringing about what we call praxis. Okay, now, next slide, please. Okay, so the approach, since we already mentioned dialogue there, okay, the approach is both participative and dialogical. Okay, so what does it do? Because it makes the learners reflect on their own history, on their own context, in place and in time, and their socio-cultural reality. That's why it's participative and dialogue. I reflect on my own context, my own reality, in particular historical context and time, and at the same time, the socio-cultural reality that would impinge on or impact on my own reality in this particular place and time. That makes it participative and dialogical. Now, how does the learner go about this dialogue according to group and the shared Christian praxis? Next, please. Okay, so tatlo. No, we make use of 3 faculties. Okay, and I very much like this. No? Although, you know, if you read literature about Groom, syempre meron din siya mga detractors. And who does not have any detractors? All of us have detractors, especially if you're, you know, if you're sikat and you're good, magkakaroon ka talaga ng detractors. That's why I'm very careful, no? Kasi baka marami na akong detractors. Anyway, okay. So, shared Christian approach, no? That the elements, what are the elements of practice? First, we have reason. Okay. The learners will be led into asking reflective questions. The first reflective question is, what is happening? Anyari? Anong nangyayari? What is causing all of these things that are happening? That is reason. Okay? That is at the level of observation. You observe and then you try to think what is happening, what is causing this. The next one, very beautiful, is memory. You know why I like this? Because our religion, our faith, our Catholic faith is really a faith, a religion of memory. Do this in memory of me, the Eucharist. Okay, so memory is part of this. Why is it important? So after seeing what is happening and what's causing this, memory, what has brought us into this particular situation? And if this is the situation, what has life taught me already that I can very well use in this particular situation? In other words, you are reckoning back, no, to what you have learned, to how you have been capacitated in the past to deal with this particular situation. And that requires memory. You know, ang medyo masakit nga sa nangyayari sa atin ngayon, no? Marami, because of what is happening, the pandemic, medyo yung memory nawawala, yung memory of the beautiful things Okay, and if we don't have memory, we cannot be grateful. Ang taong hindi nakakaalala, hindi marunong magpasalamat. Okay, so what is causing this? How has this capacity me in the past? What have I learned in the past? And the last one is what we call imagination. Okay, again, very good. Well, because now, no, in education, for example, in the College of Education, we are trying to rebrand. Okay, we are trying to restructure. And one of the ways that we are doing this is to incorporate design thinking. And in design thinking, imagination is very important. Okay, so here, after seeing what has life taught me, life has taught me to be strong and to be resilient. Imagination. How will my resiliency serve me now? Okay, if this is the situation, where is it taking me? Is there a way by which I could do something about the situation? What is this way? Banking on what I am and what I have learned in the past. So you imagine this particular situation of doing something about the situation. So these three are constant, no? And in fact, no, this would really inform the praxis-oriented approach that I am going to discuss. Okay, next. Okay, so those are the two frameworks. Okay, now we go to the star of the show, of course, no, the praxis-oriented approach that I am trying to ram down your throat or to sell to you. If you want to try it, it's okay. As I said, it's a freebie coming from me, and courtesy also of CAP, who has graciously given me this chance to share this with you. Okay, so what is this praxis-oriented approach? As we discuss praxis-oriented approach, please bear in mind, okay, both the phenomenon-based learning and the shared Christian praxis approach by Groom. Okay, so why do I call this praxis-oriented approach? Because you will see that it all culminates in praxis. It is all oriented towards praxis. Okay, so just like in phenomenon-based approach, we don't begin with the subject matter agad. Okay, what we do is we don't begin with an idea, but we begin with a prevalent issue that is relatable. Okay, and if it's relatable, somehow it becomes palatable. Okay, so relatable, something that the learners could relate with easily. Okay, so the issue may be a global issue or a local issue. Okay, so what are our references for choosing an issue? Okay, actually, if we just look around, we won't need references, to choose an issue. Dami-dami natin mga issue that are hotly contested, that are debated, and that issues that are talked about, okay, often, hotly, so on and so forth. So, but I would encourage you also, perhaps, if you are having a difficult time sa dami ng mga issue, hindi mo na alam kung anong pipiliin, you may want to be guided by the following. First, we could look at the SDGs, no? I suppose you are familiar with the SDGs. Okay, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. For example, the first one, if I remember right, the first one is reduced inequality. The first of the Sustainable Development Goals. There is life on land, there is life on water, there is poverty, so on and so forth. Now, if you don't want to have anything to do with the SDG, you could look at the Catholic social teachings. Okay, the pillars of Catholic social teachings. Okay, so one of the pillars is preferential option for the poor. So therefore, the issue that you could use is poverty. Okay, now, we cannot be saying that, for example, preferential option for the poor can only be chosen as an issue for Christian living. No. It's an issue that should run and that can run across all the learning areas. And that is the beauty of the praxis-oriented approach. And that is the beauty coming from the phenomenon-based learning. Okay, so we can make use of Catholic social teachings. Now, if you don't want to make use of SDGs, if you don't want to make use of Catholic social teachings, we have naman the Philippine Development Goals, no? If you want to look at that, like gano'n na liliit ang Pilipinas kasi may mga nakuha na sa atin. So, mga ganyan ba? Okay. Anyway, so these are issues. Okay, so you start with an issue. Okay, next. Next slide, please. Okay, so once you've chosen your issue, you go to the process. Okay, what is the process? You present facts about the issue. Okay, some prevalent facts, marami ka makukuha niyan, no? What the issue is all about, and then from the facts you deepen it, you move to concepts about the issue, and then this is the meat, no? From the facts to the concepts you proceed to meaning making, and this is very important because here is where relevance come in. Here is where reflection come in. Here is where metacognitive skills are developed. Yung iba nga, hindi lang metacognitive, gusto pa nila epistemic knowledge. No? But metacognitive na lang muna tayo. Proceed to meaning making. And most importantly, here is where you can put in the values integration part of your lesson. You know, in all the seminars I give, I would always say, there are times when it's not necessary for you to pinpoint a particular value, because valuing happens when you go to the meaning making, when you try to make meaning out of what is happening, out of the issue. That's where values come in. Okay, so of course it should not end there. It should not end with reflection. It should not end with meaning making. It ends with praxis, which is the culmination of the process. Okay, very good. The question is that the fundamental question is, how do we apply this to our lesson? Okay, I know this is Christian formation, and I know that there may be a lot of Christian living teachers who are tuned in, who are listening, no? But I'm sorry, what the lesson plan that I've chosen is not a CLE plan or not a CLE topic, but a topic on language literature, Langlit. Okay, why am I doing this? To show you that it's possible for us to apply this, to have praxis, to talk about issues, to go into meaning making, even if we are handling a particular subject that is not Christian living, that may be termed as, I don't want the term, but may be termed as a secular subject or learning area. Okay, Langlit. Okay, so yung mga nagtuturo po dyan ng Langlit, okay, language and literature, try to see and dissect and see if there is something that you can improve in this, that, or if you want to, you know, debate on this, it's fine with me. No, walang insecure po dito sa atin. Okay, so next slide, please. Okay, language and literature, grade 9. Okay, this is a sample lesson, a learning plan using the PRO-app, the praxis-oriented approach. So what is our lesson title? Actually, the lesson that we have is transitional markers. Okay, this is in the line of language, no? That we will integrate also literature here. Okay, transitional markers. So, looking at transitional markers, no, syempre tingnan mo yung lesson mo, no? Because as I told you, you cannot deviate from your lesson. You are there to teach the lesson, but to teach it not simply because they have to know the lesson, no, but because they have to know about life, okay? And what to do, and their actions, okay? So, transitional markers. Okay. So, the first step, di ba, sabi natin sa PRO-app is, you begin with an issue. So, I am looking at an issue here from the SDG. I'm looking at the SDG. One of the Sustainable Development Goals is, there should be reduced inequality. And the issue is, that we are facing is, there is the situation of inequality in the Philippines and in the world. situation of inequality in the Philippines and in the world. Isn't that an issue? That's an issue because we are not supposed to be experiencing inequality. Sabi nga, no, one of the, I very much love, no, what Catholic social teachings tell us, no. There is primacy of use over ownership. Primacy of use over ownership. Ibig sabihin, when God created the world, He created it for use, not necessarily for ownership. Okay, so yun. So there should be no inequality. That's why it's an issue, because there is a very, very grave inequality, both in the Philippines and in the world issue. Okay, so we begin with that. Next, please. Okay, so we will not discuss first transitional markers. Hindi pwedeng pag sinabi natin, oh, there is inequality, now we go to transitional markers. What's the connect? Doon pa lang wala ng transition. So, as I said, after identifying an issue, you present facts about the issue. Diba? If you remember phenomenon-based learning, you are going to dissect the issue. You're not just gonna abandon it and simply gloat over it and simply mention it. Present facts about the issue. What are the facts? I got this from Oxfam. Okay? Oxfam said, there are more billionaires than ever before, and their fortunes have grown to record levels. Meanwhile, the world's poorest got even poorer. That's a fact. And when we say it's a fact, it's incontestable. It is based on data. It is data-driven, okay, or data-informed. Okay, another fact. This is sad, but this is true. Many governments contribute to this inequality. And how do they contribute to this inequality? Governments are massively undertaxing corporations and wealthy individuals, yet underfunding vital services, public services like healthcare and education. Okay, so that's a fact. No? And from our experience, we know that. But this is actually a factual data born from a study done by Oxfam. Okay, so rich corporations, ultra-rich corporations, wealthy individuals, they are not taxed properly. Or undertaxing, tama. No? So sila nga yung dapat tinatax. No? But what happens is, there is underfunding of vital public services like healthcare and education. And that smacks of really grave inequality. So those are facts. Now, how do we move from facts to concepts? Okay, let's look at concepts. Next slide, please. Okay, as a result of all those facts, no, we create classes in our society. Classes, we stratify people. So there are classes, there are races, and there are genders. And among these, there is an equal distribution and access to resources and rights. Therefore, there is social inequality. So inequality not only in terms of income, but also social inequality. This is already another concept. Social inequality happens when there are hierarchies of class, of race, gender, and when there is an equal distribution and access to resources. That is the root cause of inequality. Now, it's not just a fact, but it's a concept. We are explaining what inequality is all about and what is the root of inequality. We have artificially created hierarchies in our society based on class, based on race, based on gender. And on top of that, resources are unequally distributed, and access to these resources is sometimes dependent not on the dignity of the human person, but on your color, on your class, and your gender. And this is the cause of inequality. Okay. Nadalaw po yung move to concepts. Pasensya na po. Move to concepts. Okay. Anyway, next slide, please. Okay, so concepts pa rin. Consequently, Okay. So what happens here is, for example, in remote teaching naman, no, as these are explained and as these are projected, you could also project. Okay, you can graphically show the forms of inequality. Okay, so you can show illustrations of income and wealth inequality. Okay, ngayon marami tayong pwede makuha, di ba? May mga drone shots, no, ng mga exclusive rich enclave. No, the enclave of the rich, and surrounding the enclave of the rich are the informal settlers. Okay, so income and wealth inequality, unequal access to education and cultural resources. We know that. I mean, this is very, very prevalent now. Unequal access to education. Just before this show, talaga, no? Just before this webinar, you know, we were in an animated conversation. May Ann and Allan were talking about this unequal access to education, especially at this time. Okay, you see, kaya nga maganda, no? Maganda, we need to watch the next webinar of CAP, which is really all about homeschooling. Because here, inequality is very prevalent. There are some parents, and many parents are not prepared. That's why even if we do homeschooling, it's also important that they are enrolled in school. So, you know, I was seeing in TV last time, sabi nung dalawang magulang, no, na wala ng trabaho, sabi, paano po namin tuturuan ang anak namin? Hindi nga po kami marunong magbasa at magsulat. Or, maaring may gadget, wala namang hotspot. May hotspot, walang gadget. Diba? So, access to education and cultural resources. Okay? And again, this is, I got this from the sociology of social inequality, no? And this is very true in our case. Very sad, but very true. Differential treatment by the police and judicial system is an indication of social inequality and is a form of inequality. Okay. I need not belabor the fact that all of these inequalities are happening in our country. Okay. So, see, facts could be cold because they are data, but you drive home the point when you present the concepts. Okay? Mas nagiging malapit sa puso dito sa concepts. Okay? Next slide, please. Okay. So, how do you now move to your lesson? Parang na-stuck ka dito, no? Galing ka dito sa concepts, pupunta ka sa transitional markers. Ano ngayon yung bridge mo? Now, you could tell the learners, okay, look at the concepts that we have presented. Okay, I suppose you read your assignment about transitional markers. Look at the concepts that I've presented. Can you pinpoint some of the transitional markers that I used? Okay. Can we go back to the other slide, please? Okay, so next pa. Okay, so if you look at the concepts that I presented, can you pinpoint the transitional markers here? What is the first transitional marker that you see? As a result. So, we can have them, by using certain strategies, we can help them identify the transitional marker. The next one, next slide. What transition, hindi po, yung before this. Yung consequently po, consequently. Yan. No, yan. Okay. What transitional marker did I use here? I use the word consequently. So you see, even what I'm saying here is, the teacher has to be very, very creative. In the sense that even if you are talking about facts and concepts about the social issue, you are already integrating your topic and your lesson even here. So, di ba sabi ko nga sa inyo, what I told you when it comes to phenomenon-based learning is you don't simply use the phenomenon or the issue as a springboard. It should run all throughout the lesson. So here, in the concept that I use, again, I made use of a transitional marker. What is that? Consequently. Okay, now you can segue, next slide. You can segue now into your lesson. Proceed to the lesson is Step D, transitional markers. Aside from the transitional markers found in the concepts that you have pointed out, the list that follows indicate transitional markers and their uses. So ito lesson na talaga. So you see, you are teaching them the lesson not simply because you want them to learn about the lesson, but you want to them to learn about social inequality. You want to move them to action. We will see later. Okay, so what are these transitional markers and their uses? Yan, no? To indicate additional, again, to indicate cause and effect, to indicate commission in the manner that, or likewise, or to indicate concession. After all, although may be true, so on. Although this may be true, di ba? Concession yan. Okay? So next slide, please. Okay. Aside, so eto pa, iba-iba pa ring mga transitional markers to indicate contrast. After all, although true yan. And then to indicate special features or examples. For example, for instance, incidentally, indeed, in fact, or to indicate summary, in brief, in conclusion, in short, in the whole. So of course, may reference ako dyan because I am not a Langley teacher. Okay, so after you have presented all those transitional markers, of course, you must have a drill, di ba? Kailangan mag-drill ka. Okay, write 5 sentences making use of different transitional markers. Okay, you can always do it online. Okay, in order to deepen naman, no, the lesson about transitional markers, and for you to help you do some kind of a formative assessment to in order to see if there is an absorption or if there is an understanding of, or if there is learning. So you can do some kind of formative assessment after this, a drill. Okay, so that's proceeding to the lesson. Next, since this is Langlit, next slide please. Okay, since this is Langlit, our concern is not only should not only be language, it should also be literature. Okay, so since you are talking about transitional marker, you may tell the students, okay, we are going to read a poem, or we are going to discuss a poem that makes use of transitional markers. Okay, and what is that poem? The beautiful poem by Longfellow, which is called A Psalm of Life. Okay, now, kahit hindi ko kayo naririnig, dahil Facebook tayo, magsabayang pagbigkas tayo. Okay, so A Psalm of Life, tell me not in, hindi ko mabasa, medyo malabo siya. So, what I'm saying is, okay, you make use of a poem. Now, how do you incorporate that? We say that in the poem, there are also transitional markers. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, next. Tapusin na natin itong poem. Okay, next. And next. And next. And next. Ayan. Okay, so after that, so kita nyo na, no? Facts, concepts, lesson, okay, transitional markers, and then you enrich it with literature. This time, after bringing in the literature that also has transitional markers, you proceed to meaning making. Okay. So in the meaning making, we pose reflective questions. And if you will scrutinize these questions would bring in what Groom would say about reason, memory, imagination. Okay, so how do we segue into that? Aside from showing us how transitional markers can be effectively used or can effectively be used, the poem also presents to us insights about life. Okay, so first question, reality. What important insights about life are articulated in the poem? Okay, next question. In like manner, so you see, please take note, even in my questions, I make use of transitional markers. And this one is about memory. Okay. In like manner, that's a transitional marker. In like manner, how will you express your insights about life? Here, you know, this is very important, that this is already dialogical. There is already dialogue here. What dialogue? Dialogue with the self, your insights about life. Okay, and a metacognitive question. Is there a similarity between your insights, thinking about thinking, your insights, and those articulated in the poem? Okay, memory. And then we move to imagination. The third question, how will your insights on life help you formulate ways on reducing social inequality in society? See, you see what I'm pointing out is from the beginning to the lesson on transitional marker to the literature piece, social inequality is always present. Because if you do that, you firm up the issue on social inequality. This is the secret, di ba sabi nga natin, this is the secret in learning. In learning, repetition in various levels is very important. So the final question on imagination is, how will your insights on life help you formulate ways on reducing social inequality? That is meaning making. And as I said a while ago, it is in meaning making where valuing really happens. Okay, next. So after meaning making, all of this will culminate in praxis. And the praxis could be a form of an assessment. Okay, what is the praxis? Using your insights about life. This is actually like answering the last question about what can you do? I mean, using your insight on life. No, but you consider it pwede, no, as an assessment and an assignment. Okay, using your insights about life. Write a blog expressing your commitment to contribute in reducing social inequality and in bringing about social transformation. Here, the learner will now highlight the values that he has and that he can use in order to contribute to reducing social inequality and bringing about social transformation. Now, may social inequality tayo dito. Siyempre, we should not forget about transitional markers, because we are also assessing that. Remember that that's the lesson, so therefore we should assess understanding of the lesson. The number 2 is, your blog should also indicate the effective use of transitional markers that you may pick from the list that we presented. Okay, so issue is there, transitional markers are there. And then next slide, meron pa diyang caveat, a word of caution. Be wary of cluttering your writing with unnecessary howevers, moreovers, and consequentlies. But you should be equally careful to know that these markers and to use them, be careful to know these markers and how to use them creatively. And when you use them, they create clarity. So again, I got that from the website. So you see, in the praxis, what we want is action. But this action still would target their learnings about transitional markers. Okay, now, conclusion. Conclusion, I have 7 minutes. Okay, where is encounter? Where is dialogue? Where is praxis? Where does encounter happen? Encounter happens when we present social issues. It provides a venue, an opportunity for encounter. In what way? In discussing facts and concepts about inequality or any other issue, the learner encounters the realities that exist at the local and at the global level, and you put it right in his or her face. Okay, and this is where encounter happens. Helping the learners realize that inequality reduces people to inhumane conditions will elicit from them compassion rather than judgment. You remember about our concept of inequality of encounter. It's all about compassion rather than judgment. Okay, and presenting that issue on inequality put people in relationships. Not at the background, not at the periphery, not as an abstract concept, but at the center of the issue. After all, when we talk about inequality, we talk about people. We talk about relationship. And the reason why we have inequality is because there is something wrong with our relationships, with the way we relate with others. There you have encounter. Okay? Where is dialogue? Next slide, please. Where is dialogue? Meaning making. Okay, your meaning making, which is precipitated by reflective and metacognitive question, leads to a dialogue with the self, reality, dialogue with the past, memory, and dialogue with the future, imagination. The teacher, by providing comments, this is very important, no? When we ask them, no, to the drills, and when we ask them to come up with a blog, the teacher, by providing comments, mga marginal notes natin, no, that encompass cognition and would include affection. Remember that our marginal note should only be about cognition, whether they understand or not, no? Our comment should also include affection. Okay. When we do this in the submitted works of the learners, this facilitates dialogue. Okay. Finally, in the dialogue, their encounter with poverty and inequality and its direct effects on the dignity of human persons will trigger praxis. Praxis will articulate their encounter and dialogue with the victims of inequality. Okay, next slide. Okay, how is praxis facilitated? Well, first through the blog. Okay, because the blog will articulate what the learner commits to do to reduce inequality. The blog articulates the learner's commitment to contribute to social transformation. Okay, it may be a praxis that may not be possible at this time, no? But you know, pwede pa rin naman mag-create ng situations even at home where they could do the commitment they articulated in order to reduce inequality. So pwede pa rin, aside from a blog, you could also come up with another what we call assessment task or a course inquiry project. Okay, next po. Tapos na pala yung ano ko, 1.5. Okay, so final words. It's all up to you. There are many apps in the App Store and Google Play. Again, I would say the choice is up to you. There are strategies for distance learning. It's up to you if you want to use them. There is the praxis-oriented approach or pro-app, but to use it or not use it, it is up to you. But I would like to challenge you. Okay, next slide. It's all up to you means it's not just a play on words. It's all up to you means that whatever app or approach you use, the effectivity of such lies in two very important factors. First, when you try to use an app or an approach, you need to appropriate the app or approach. So appropriate the app or approach to yourself so that you can use it skillfully and effectively. The app that you are appropriating should feel like second skin and should not have been adopted simply because there is an external opposition. If that is the case, then there is no appropriation and you become ill at ease in using the app, no matter how excellent the app may be. So the first, it's all up to you, is appropriating. Second, next slide. Tatlo pala to, no? The second, it's all up to you, is apprising. Confronted with an app, apprise yourself. Be honest. First, be honest, you may need help. Not every one of us is tech savvy. In fact, one study when I had this conference with Indonesia, one speaker would say, young people are supposed to be tech savvy, but they are not really savvy when it comes to online learning. Okay, so apprise yourself. Be honest. You may need help. Apprise yourself. You have talents, yes. You've got what it takes to soar, even in this challenging time. So being honest with yourself, I need help, ask for help. Be honest with yourself that your talent may not really be for remote learning, but you can certainly do with a lot of help coming from other people. Apprise, okay? And the final app is appearing confident. Okay, we cannot be, when we do remote teaching, even if it's remote and even if it's synchronous, we cannot be tentative. We need to appear confident and believe that you have exhausted all that you need to do to be the best facilitator there is. Okay? Not just a facilitator of learning, but a companion of the learners in navigating the terrain of education in this difficult time. And I very much love the etymology of the word companion. Companion comes from the word kumpanis. Kumpanis meaning to break bread. We break bread with our learners. So appropriating, uprising, and appearing, when we are able to do this, we can effectively use whatever app we have chosen. Okay? Then, next slide. Finally, if you are able to make use of these three, appropriating, uprising, and appearing confident, then you will transition from being appealing, from being appalling to being appealing, from being apprehensive to being appreciative, and from being an apprentice to being the apple of the eye of your learners or students. Okay? In the end, I would say, next slide, please. Okay. Let me end the sharing with two last apps. Okay, nasaturate na ba tayo sa app? Okay. The first app, an appeal to teachers, especially of private schools. Be with us and stay with us. We need reliable and committed partners in this important mission, especially in this difficult time. My last appeal, a resounding applause to all teachers, school leaders, and staff. May the God of all nations, the source of unending grace, watch over, protect, guide, and give us the strength to persevere. Amen. Thank you very much. The timer says I've consumed all my, and those are my references. You may want to look them up and see how I was able to make use of them. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, that's wonderful, Dr. Pilar. Ang galing.
Thank you.
Maraming
Thank you so much.
salamat. So we now proceed to the question and answer portion of this webinar.
Okay.
But before that, just a few reminders. No? For those who still want to ask questions, you may post your question at the comment section. Pero at the way things are, meron tayong 2,300 comments and probably mga 100 plus na yung questions. So, karamihan kasi greetings, no? And then applause for you. Papuri para sa napakagandang binigay mong webinar. There's just so many takeaways. Pangalawa, please be informed that you will receive the certificate of attendance only upon completion of the evaluation form. The link will be posted in the comment section kung hindi pa nakalagay doon later on and will be available until 2 p.m. today, July 28, no? So, check nyo po, i-press nyo yung link and then you do the evaluation so that you'll get the certificate later. Okay? Please ensure that you type down both your names and email addresses accurately. For those asking for the presentation, again, you can watch the video after the live streaming and the materials will be uploaded in our CEP website, www.sayap.org.ph, or our YouTube channel. Just press the subscribe button as well when you go to Sayap channel. So we're ready for the questions. But before the questions, siguro may mga papuri, no? Marami tayo niyan kanina, no? Sabi ni Edgar Eslit, wow! Values integration really breaks boundaries across any form of academic discipline. The myth of praxis-oriented approach, so to say. Thank you, Dr. Pilar, for this wonderful input. Ito naman si Rhea Castro, ang galing ni Dr. Pilar. Enjoying watching and listening to her. Thanks, CAP, for the interesting topics and high-caliber speakers. So anong gusto mo mga tanong ngayon, Dr. Pilar? Easy? Difficult? Clincher?
Bring it on.
Ito, tingnan natin yung kay Jose or Josie Burgos. Sabi niya, a life of interiority is crucial to bringing about wholeness of persons.
Yes.
How does a millennial teacher who is restless can bring this about in students?
Okay. Well, the millennial, I would understand, no? Sabi nga natin, the millennial teachers have received a lot of bashing, no, from us, no? But you see, there are also articles which tell us that all of this, no, yung restlessness ng millennial teachers is just a cover-up for an internal search. Okay, now if they are in the school setting, you know, one of the marks of a Catholic school sa ating PCSS is that the creation of a community. And the kind of community that we are creating is not only a professional community of learners, but a community that discerns. Okay, so perhaps what the school can do, especially a Catholic school, is to engender an atmosphere where these millennial learners are invited, okay, to plumb the depths of their hearts. So provide occasions for this, no? Perhaps I would like to believe positively that what these millennial teachers may be waiting for is an opportunity, an environment where they not be judged, an environment where they will be accompanied by people who may be experts at interiority. In fact, yan yung sinasabi ng dun sa isang document ng Congregation on Catholic Education. The religious in Catholic schools. So, religious in Catholic schools, the document calls them experts in communion. The religious in Catholic schools can invite these millennial learners not only by structured activities, but by the witness of their life on how interiority can be facilitated, can be brought about. Okay, so creating opportunities talaga through witness, through structured activities, and most especially the spirit of community among the people in the school.
At in many of the Catholic schools na doon ng community, I hope they take advantage of that, no?
Yes.
To really witness to our mission.
Yes.
Ito naman kay Josie Burgos. What aspect of the human person, of the student, should be addressed most urgently in this time of the pandemic? And how do we do this?
Okay. Yung mga tanong niyo pang dissertation. Anyway, you remember I have this part, sabi ko, marginal note pang dissertation no? Parang nagdi-defend uli ako. Anyway, you remember I talk about marginal notes. And I said that in the marginal notes, what is also primordial, what is essential are not so much the comments on cognition, but the comments on affection. The affective part is very important. And I think at this time, no, among young people, affection is very important. The feeling level is very important. Like I would always say, no, emotion leads to motion. Kaya nga siguro kinawag na emotion yan because motion is there. We are not moved unless we are emotionally affected, right? Kapag lahat nasa isip yan, parang hindi pa tayo mamumove. But if we are emotionally affected, let's say for example, nanonood tayo ng may probinsyano pa ngayon, So, nanonood tayo ng probinsyano. Oo, nakita natin na very emotional na yung scene. Pati tayo parang sige, di ba? Ganun tayo. No? So, I think what we can address at this time, of course, we need to address cognition. We are teachers. But the most important is, how do we educate the heart? How do we educate the emotion? How do we influence emotion? Okay? And we can do this, yun na nga sinasabi ko, one is by marginal notes. And you know what some people, very creative teachers do in remote teaching? They use text messages. No? And the text messages and these messages may begin with a lesson, but eventually moving into something which is essential, which would target the mental health of the learners, which would target their emotions. So ito yung mga bagay na with limited resources, these are the things that we could do. I think that at this time, very primordial ang affection. No, the affective aspect. Just a sharing, as I was telling Allan and Men kanina, you know, I spend sometimes the whole morning answering emails, and a lot of emails coming from my students. And I could see how this particular pandemic has aggravated their emotional state. And I would answer them, no, try as much as possible, try to console them. In consoling, ito, isang tip, nabasa ko ito. Maganda, sorry Allan, medyo chatty ako.
Sige lang, sige lang. Oo.
Meron tayong tinatawag na conversational narcissism. Okay. What is this conversational narcissism?
Okay.
In dealing with our students, especially at the affective level, especially when they are opening up to us, we should avoid what we call conversational narcissism. Anong ibig sabihin yan? So for example, the student is saying, I feel that life is unfair. I'm very sad, no, because my parents are like this and like that. Conversational narcissism would be like this. The teacher saying, you know, I also went through that No? Naranasan ko din yan, no? Alam mo, so, it's not about you.
It becomes about her.
It's about your student. Ang tawag dyan, conversational narcissism. Why conversational narcissism? It's because nag-focus ka sa sarili mo. Okay? It may be true that you're going through the same thing, but you are not equal. At may issue itong bata na hindi mo issue.
Yeah.
So I think that is also very important. Okay? And
Pero sakit natin yun, ano? Minsan na biglang...
It's a malady. It's a malady. Guys.
Gusto natin mag-share. We want to listen to ourselves.
Ako nung namatayan ako ganito. Pero iba ka naman, no?
We miss out on their experience.
Yes. Okay. Yes. I hope
Ito naman, Dr. Pilar. Sige. Yeah, I think that is very clear. Maganda yon. Ito naman galing kay Ma'am Digna Delfino. Hi, Ma'am Pilar. I was just thinking. If a Catholic school adheres to religion as core of the curriculum, as in the case of yun nga, yung maraming Catholic schools sa atin, etc. Is it a form of phenomena-based learning? Just curious po to see its parallelism.
Yeah. Okay. Digna, I know kasi meron kang may secret kami niya ni Digna. She's my friend. You know, one of the parang I would call it a tributary. One of a tributary of phenomenon-based learning, and which is very related to it, is an approach in Christian living, an approach in religious education. What is that approach? The approach is called issue-oriented approach. Okay, which is similar to phenomenon-based, which is similar to praxis-oriented and to group. What is that issue-oriented approach? Ang kasi ng mga, some people believe that the way we teach Christian living is not effective because we are still fixated with the confessional type of teaching. Ano yung confessional type? Of course, it has its merits. Confessional type that our goal is at the end of our Christian living that they should be confessing the Christian faith or the Catholic faith. Nothing wrong with that. Kaya lang sometimes it becomes so what they call brain-based, no? Or it is something that is so cognitive. Ang issue-oriented naman is similar to what I'm doing, and it makes religion as core of the curriculum. Why? Because you could choose one issue that would tie up the different learning areas, centering on what could be done about the issue coming from the different areas and informed by the particular vision of the school, mission of the school, the particular institutional charism of the school, the particular goals of the school. In that way, talagang naging core of the curriculum ang CLE. I forgot to mention pala about praxis-oriented approach. Praxis-oriented approach is also does what we call a constructive alignment. Kasi in praxis-oriented approach, in a particular school, you have to look at your graduate attributes, you have to look at your vision, mission, you have to look at your goals, up to the point that you look at your intended learning, institutional learning outcomes, course intended learning outcomes, so on and so forth. So Digna related in the sense that the praxis-oriented approach and the phenomenon-based approach makes use of an issue. And in CLE, in religion as core of the curriculum, there is such a thing as an issue-oriented approach that could complement the confessional way of teaching religion. Okay? So, Digna, discuss pa tayo. Ano naman kami.
May follow-up pa siya, pero alagay ko na sagot mo na.
Yes.
Ito naman kay Florence. What do you suggest as long-term solution to the decade-old problem of social inequality? Medyo philosophical at hindi ko alam kung rhetorical tong question niya. Long-term solution to the decade-old social inequality.
It's not only decades old, it's centuries old. No, social inequality. Unless, sabi nga, you know, if I will have recourse to the Catholic social teachings, no, what Catholic social teachings would give as a solution to two levels, at the level of personal conversion and at the level of structural conversion. Okay, in other words, at the level of personal conversion, kailangan bawat isa muna sa atin is convinced that there is social inequality. Unless we admit to ourselves that those social inequality is a reality, we will not do anything about it.
Correct.
No? So there is personal conversion, to be convinced that there is social inequality, and the conviction that I, as a person, can do something about it. But it's also important that we look at our existing structures, because there is such a thing as oppressive structures in our society. We need to dismantle the structures of oppression in our society and instead put up what Catholic social teachings would say, structures of grace. Papalitan natin ang ating mga unjust social structures with the structures of grace. And all of these are rooted in conversion, personal and societal conversion. Now, to do that, yung tinatawag nating social conscience, no? Trying to pick both the personal conscience and the social conscience of society. And it's something that is very good, very, very difficult to do. But it's the way to go if we want to solve inequality. Very rhetorical, ano?
But it's a good way of responding to it.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much for that. And most of our comments now are really affirmations, Dr. Pilar. Ito kay Arroway. She's so energetic. She's a good speaker with matching facial expressions. I love it. You are inspiring. Sabi naman ni Felisa, you are an inspiring facilitator in imparting acquired knowledge. Thanks be to God and to you, Dr. Romero.
Thank you.
Eto naman. Nakapagdadala ng energy sa amin si Madam. Parang ako napapagod sa kanya. Eto, let's go back to questions.
Yes.
Are Catholic schools unique in being conscious of, sabi nga natin, cultivating a culture of dialogue or encounter? What if the teachers are from the public school or from other private schools that are not Catholic? Is there a level of exclusivity if it's a Catholic institution, or can they also practice this?
Yeah. Well, the fact that we are all in this very holy vocation, which is teaching, that doesn't make the Catholic school the exclusive proprietor or the exclusive owner of encounter and dialogue.
I agree.
Teaching. If you do teaching, Pedro Poveda would say, teaching is blessing the child. Okay, so you can be a blessing to your students whether you are in the public school or in the private school. Encounter and dialogue. Why? Because teaching is about relationship. Teaching is about the human person, not the subject matter. And the moment that we think about the human person, this learner who is capable of becoming the person that God wants him to be, whether you are in the public or the Catholic school, then encounter and dialogue begins. In other words, nakikita natin yung tao. No? Beside all the preparations and the modules and all that, the moment we center on the human person, okay, then we say that encounter and dialogue happens even in the context of public school. Di ba? Sa public school nga, no, ngayon, sinasabi nila, di ba, magkakaroon na ng GMRC. No? But even if you are not teaching GMRC, no, even in a very secular subject area like math in the public school, there could also be encounter. For example, no, when I ask the teachers to do demo teaching, no, na yung lesson nila about sets. No? So again, no, sets. It would speak of encounter sa set, encounter with similar, di ba? And also sets would talk of encounter with different people. And that encounter with different people engenders dialogue. So sets is taught in both Catholic and public school. So again, there is encounter and dialogue even if you are in the public school. Plus, sabi nga natin, again, no, this is right. The person of the teacher is very important.
Correct.
So a teacher is a teacher whether you are in the public or the private school.
Okay, thank you for that. No, that's very clear. Do you agree that the shadow pandemic for the young today is mental health related and it's really worsening? What can the schools as places of encounter do to mitigate the effects of mental stress?
Okay, pag-dissertation uli. Yeah, sabi nga nila, no, besides the pandemic, the coronavirus 19 pandemic that we are experiencing, there is also the pandemic of mental health. Okay? Brought about by the anxiety and restlessness of our age, no? A lot of literature are saying that one of the causes, of course, one of the causes is family. No, there seemed to be a breakdown of families.
Breakdown, yeah, correct.
Yes, no, families in challenging situations. We no longer make use of the word broken families, no, because it stigmatizes.
Correct.
Our students, no, so we say families in challenging situations which could aggravate, no, and then the very uncertain future that we have, to the point that not only young people are having mental issues, even like senior people are having mental issues. Diba sabi ko nga sa inyo, yung mga baby boomer nasa liminal space, and liminal space, yan yung space na parang, what's next for me? Where do I go? Hindi na ako makakope sa demands ng teaching kasi medyo senior na ako. But at the same time, what do I do after this? So that also causes mental health. No? So again, I would say that in all of this issue, yung interiority is very important. What can schools do? In UST, what we did is we only pick what are essentials, because we believe we cannot be bombarding our learners with a lot of topics, no? Ano ba yung essential na dapat nating maparating sa kanila, no? So we did not follow strictly, no, the guide given. We pick from them what is it that we can compromise, what is it that we cannot compromise. In that way, no, they are not so bombarded with a lot of things to do. No? And I believe in this. Always inject humor in in what you say and in what you do, because humor talaga, no, it instantly animate people. No, and try to say, oh, this is the bright side of these things. These are just random things that we can do, but it's something that we really need to address.
Naku, naubusan tayo ng oras, Dr. Pilar.
Yes.
Marami pang questions, pero I think siguro ipapadala ko na lang sa yung questions.
Sige, and I will try to answer them.
Related naman to to what we already discussed and you mentioned. So papasalamatan na kita. Maraming salamat, Dr. Pilar. Most of the comments there are also congratulatory comments, affirmations, and appreciation for accepting this invitation from the CAP. We learned a lot today. These are some of our takeaways. The new social condition, the absence of face-to-face interaction calls for new approaches and new ways of doing things. Our visual presence requires us to understand the discordant voices in this type of encounter. Our Christian orientation compels us to listen to where people are coming from. As peace is lasting if we form our children in dialogue, as you said. We need to promote the culture of being open to what others have to say. Each one has something good to say. I love that you quoted Pope Francis when he said that the emphasis should always be on compassion rather than on judgment. Understanding context is the foundation of relationships. We should deep dive into our telos, the ultimate goal in life, because with all the noise and the chaos, it is easy to lose oneself and spin out of control. Finally, those of us engaged in schools should always remember that we are not just in schools to teach and facilitate learning. We need to accompany our students and each other. We need to be creatively present more than ever before when physically we cannot always do so now. Before we end, we'd like to thank Clips and Raxo City for being our amazing partners for this webinar. On Thursday, we would like to invite you once again for the fourth session of the third webinar series of CAP for the second part of the webinar entitled Teaching Today, delivering powerful and engaging modules through different modalities with Ms. Debbie Grafil. Remember that the session starts at 9:30 in the morning on Thursday, not 10 o'clock. So thank you once again, Dr. Pilar.
Thank you.
Thank you all for those who watched us live. On behalf of our President, Father Elmer Dizon, and the CAP Board, and the members of the Secretariat, this is Allan Arellano, saying that in all things, God may be glorified. Thank you.
Amen. Thank you.